Good men do the things they like to do. Great men do the things they need to do. But champions do the things they hate to do, to grow, to achieve, and to overcome all obstacles in their path. To learn more, visit www.evenplace.com.
This is DrAlvinCom, the business of wisdom, where world leaders and thinkers do come to chat. Very fortunate to have live here in our Washington, D.C. studios, the best-selling author of Dramas of a Bald-Head Queen, Nina C. Brewton. Brewton?
Brewton.
Brewton.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Speak those things.
Yeah, speak those things into being. Now, at the beginning of the book, I love the concept of drama. So give me a working definition of drama.
Drama's being a series of conflicting events or forces, which is all that life is, really. We're always battling in our minds whether to go left or right, to go the decision to accept Christ or not, or to go whether we'll go to heaven or hell, to grow your hair or not. We're all faced with dramas throughout the whole day. And so that is definitely, a lot of times people will see the word dramas and they'll think, oh, this is going to be some, tell-all. And it's just not. It's not that. But, if that's enough to get their attention, then that's fine.
But you did tell quite a bit in the book.
I did tell quite a bit. I did. But trust me, I did not tell as much as I could have.
Now tell me about growing up.
Yes.
Where did you grow up? What state were you in? And tell me about your household, because you had a very, very unique family scenario. I guess your family was the first modern family before there was a Modern Family TV show.
I guess we were. You're kind of right. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas, and I'll be home there tomorrow. So excited to go visit. I was raised, my parents divorced when I was 2. And so I have no recollection of them ever being a family. My father retrieved my brother and I from a children's home when I was the age of 4. My brother is 2 years older than me. My mother, we had been living with my mother. She had went into the hospital for Lord knows what. I still don't know to this day. I suspect it was her bouts with mental illness as well, as she did have a number of times in and out of mental health facilities and was later diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. So I understand your pain growing up. My father, we lived with him by the time I was 4 until I was 10. And during that time, he had been married 2 other times, just between the 6 years of those 6 years of my life. And there were other women in between there, whomever we were staying with at the time. My father was the type who would use people to get whatever he was a good guy in general, but he was the type that if we needed a place to stay, he'd sweep some woman off of her feet and we'd be living with her the next thing I know. And so when I was 10, we actually moved in with my mother and her partner. My mother was a lesbian. And so when I was 11 is when I found out that she was. And she sat my brother and I down, and we're downstairs, and she says, I want to let you all know that I'm a lesbian, and Myrna is my partner. And they'd been together all these years. They'd been roommates. I knew that. But in my young mind, I never gave it much thought. And my brother, so I cried when she told me. I literally cried. And she said, well, why are you crying? And my brother's looking at me like, oh, God, get yourself together. And I said, well, I like boys. And she said, well, you don't have to be gay because I'm gay. And oh, no? Okay, well, that was good. Like, whatever then. As long as you can do what you want. But I like Delon and D'Angelo can sing. And, I was 11. I was boy crazy. So that was interesting. And then interestingly enough, that household, I stayed there between the age of 10 until I moved out when I was 18. And it was the most stable home I'd ever lived in. Was with 2 women. I learned to cook. I learned to clean. I learned to change a carburetor in a car. I learned everything I needed to know.
Now, one thing I thought about, because I always like to take a different approach, and we want everybody to get the book to get the specifics of your life.
Okay.
One thing I thought about, and you confirmed it, I want to get and I want you to think about this from a different perspective, in the sense that all your life you lived in environments that were heavily sexually charged.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned concerning the situation, the scenario of your father. You mentioned the scenario of your mother. So sex is a very, very important part of everybody's life.
Right.
Also, it's commerce, it's exchange. And so how do those kind of things influence you? Because, like I said, we don't necessarily need to get into the specifics because they're very clearly outlined in your book, the part that you wanted to share. But when you're in a sexually charged family as a young person, how do you think that influenced you in your sexuality and the things you did growing up and as an adult?
Right. You know, I think a lot of times, particularly in this day and age, young women are taught to be sexually liberated. And I kind of, early on in my 20s, I really kind of found myself, I felt that was what I was doing. I was a lot like my father, as you said, as I mentioned in the book. And so I was, sleeping around, I was doing this and that. And I mean, I was out there because I'm thinking, well, if these men can do it, well, then I can do it. And I'm going to do it well. And did. And I did a lot like my father. And so there were, I was most like him in regards to that. The sexuality and the irony is that in my mother's relationship, there wasn't a lot. My mother had issues with her, with sex. And so her partner, they actually ended up breaking up, and that was part of one of the big issues, is that my mother but she had been sexually abused. My mother had. So it was difficult with men or women for her to find comfort in having sex. What I had to learn is that, as with anything, with freedom comes responsibility. And people fail to realize that and fail to live that. And so even in my sexual liberation, I had a responsibility to the people that I was involved with, and I had a responsibility to myself, and I now know that. Even though I feel like I'm taking from all these men, and I'm, may only be given a little, I'm given more than, now I know I gave way more than they ever deserved. They could never, the bills paid, the whatever was happening, whatever the exchange was, if you will, it wasn't worth it. It just wasn't.
So now, for some individuals, they can't turn on and off their sexuality. Mm-hmm. So did that influence your marriage, because you get married and some of the things that you used to do, you're still doing? Right. In the marriage. Right. How come that leaped over into the marriage, opposed to you now, you're in a committed relationship. Right. I believe you got a good man.
He's wonderful.
Okay, wonderful. And but yet still, you were still a wanderer.
Right. And I think that, and this is where it's so funny, because I teach young people now, and when I speak to young people in youth groups and whatnot, I'm always an advocate for abstinence. Mm-hmm. And I can say that because I now know that my experiences are way different than my husband's life experiences sexually. Mm-hmm. And so I have more experience. Mm-hmm. That's been rather difficult to help us to grow together. Mm-hmm. In the marriage bed, in our marriage in general, to be quite frank. It is. And so we're growing. We're still, we're doing well, but it's taken effort to truly learn one another, because in the back of my mind, there's always other people. Even if I'm not trying to put forth a conscious effort to compare the two, or whomever, him with whomever, it's one of those things that's going to be in the back of your mind. And that's how, when you talk about the energies being transferred, and you talk about, the soul ties, and you get into all of that, those are things that will harm a marriage, because the marriage bed is an opportunity for you to grow with your partner and learn with that individual. But if you've already both had these two totally different experiences, then you're missing out on the greatest intimacy that is meant for marriage.
So I guess in the natural, I have like a footprint or a fingerprint. Mm-hmm. You have like a lust print.
I suppose I do.
That's still there, that is going along. And I think these are the kind of discussions that we need to have. We're talking about dramas of a bald-head queen. Now, let's talk about the change. Mm-hmm. When did that change begin to happen, that you're now this committed person, that you're now going around encouraging people to say, I thought about Solomon. Solomon had a lot of wealth. He did a lot of things. He says, you know what? I've been out there, but it's vanity of vanities.
Right.
And now, I want you to know, since I've done it all, it ain't what it used to be. It ain't what you think it is.
Right.
The grass ain't green on the other side.
Right.
And the kind of life it is not the kind of life, because you do have these things still lingering in your life, even though you're now in the future. Your past is still in the future. So what was some of the things that began to cause you now to be on the right road now?
Goodness. I had gotten to a point where in recognizing, well, one, my father and his lifestyle changed once he truly began to live for Christ. And so for years I would see his testimony, I would see his life, and he was an example. Even after getting married, I remember after his most recent marriage, and they've been married now for a long time. And so I can't even remember. Goodness, it's been years. But they're doing well. And even still afterwards, I remember him, giving this woman eyes at like a convenience store or something. And I was like, Daddy, no, because he's got a good wife at home. And he was like, you're right. And so I saw that it was still going to be a struggle for him. Just because you have this good thing at home, you have these habits that you have to not act on. You have to make a decision. And what it comes down to, again, is responsibility. I'm responsible to my husband and to maintaining his integrity and my own in our relationship. And even before I got married, I'd gotten to a point where I knew that this was not the person that I was created to be. I knew that not just being promiscuous, but even the alcohol that I was consuming, on the level that I was consuming it, and, the partying I was doing, or whatever the case, wasn't me. It wasn't aiding in me fulfilling God's purpose for my life. At that point, I had already accepted my calling to ministry. I knew the Lord. I knew that He, I knew what He had intended for my life and the vision that He had already placed in me. But I'd gotten distracted. My focus was not on right. And so it definitely takes a concerted effort every day. It really does. And I think that all of us struggle with, various areas of our own lives and the things that we fall victim to as a matter of habit. But we have to make it a point to stop, back up, and say, is this going to be expedient for what I need in my life and for my husband's life?
There's a lot of things I wish we could sit and talk about. I feel like I'm sitting here on a porch with a glass of lemonade and being able to get to know you. So at the end of the day, when a person today goes out and get a copy of Dramas of a Bald-Head Queen, what are the takeaways? What do you want them to understand and experience?
The thing that keeps coming up as I speak to people and share with individuals this book, my baby, is that love and grace are all that we need. I mean, really. Forgiveness is important. These are all things that I think would help to make everyone's life just a little easier. There are people who are struggling with forgiving themselves. There are people who are struggling with forgiving their parents. We live in a day and age where everyone wants to blame someone else for why they can't succeed in life. And my parents sent me through some stuff, but they did the best that they knew how to do with what they had and with what they knew. Because of, our parents have issues long before we ever come along, clearly. And instead of internalizing everything that they did, the alcoholism and the womanizing and everything, I have made it a choice. I've made a choice to do the opposite. I've made a choice to forgive them and to understand that their error and their lack was not a personal attack on me. They wanted the best for me. And so I think a lot of times our parents are the first God that we know. We don't know God when we're born. And so that's why He gives us, we come through our parents. He sends Himself through them. And if that same God can be forgiving towards me, then how dare I not forgive my parents for being as human as I, when it came down to it. So that is pretty much the bottom line. I want people to understand that, first of all, the love of Christ is enough. It is truly enough. And I want people to receive revelation from that. And we learn about the love of Christ through our relationships with other people. And that is where we are able to where it manifests itself, where it should manifest itself.
So if a person wants to be able to get a copy of this book, how can they do so?
It is currently available at Amazon.com, IndieBound.org, and Barnes & Noble, recently BarnesandNoble.com as well. So it is also available for Kindle. We're working on the Nook, but yes, it is available online.
Well, thank you so very much for traveling and being here today live in our studio here at the Even Place. This will be featured at DrAlvinCom, the business of wisdom, where world leaders and thinkers like me to come to chat. Also will feature on Facebook at DrAlvin.com. And you continue to have a remarkable and amazing day.